So, good morning. Welcome to Millington on the Yorkshire Wolds in the East Yorkshire. It's a bit odd sort of title it Millington because people probably don't know where Millington is, perhaps. And really, I've taken smaller areas as some of the bigger ones have done. So I think this was part of a tour of the central Wolds and the sort of Wolds escarpment as well. And so I've come down to sort of look in detail at these areas, and largely because personally I've walked the Yorkshire Wolds Way this year, and it's quite interesting because none of these sort of landscapes you can really see from a car apart from Millington Dale that you can actually drive down. People who came on the trip to Beverley with a lady who was a coach driver at the time, we came back via Millington Dale, coming all the way down there as well. It's a very narrow road, but it's got some fantastic chalk landscapes down there. So let's have a look at the area we're going to look at today. I've had to use this map because this is the National Trails map that actually has the Yorkshire Wolds Way on it. So that's the blue line that you can see coming along here, and if you can see the blue dotted line, that's the way I'm taking the route today, rather across country. So this is the bottom road here, which is the road from Pocklington, North Dalton, and goes through to Driffield. The major road one you can see is just a bit below that, the A road there. And because that's the one that goes through water, where we've looked at before. So coming across here, the star there, that is, George will tell me off for this, but it's spelled Kilnwick Percy, but it's locally pronounced Killick Percy. And that's a hall down there that you can see from the route. Goes then along Millington Dale on a high level, but the path follows the road down the centre of the dale. So one's looking down on the other, and then they're both conjoined together at the end of Millington Dale. And because then there's a walk across to Huggate. The footpath doesn't go through Huggate, but I've driven round and taken photographs of Huggate itself. And then I'm just coming to an end, arriving at Fridaythorpe. So I'm not including really Fridaythorpe in it because I'm proposing to do another talk that goes from Fridaythorpe to Fixendale and beyond. I say that's just an interesting part of the Dales, the Wolds as well. So some of these dales which I'm looking off, there are side dales off here, and you can actually park near the end of them and walk up them. So they're not particularly hard, but they really can't be seen from the car. But I guess they're only sort of 3 or 4 minutes walk, if that, from where you can park the car coming down there. So that's about from here to Fridaythorpe is about a 9-mile route. I sort of split them down into roughly 2-mile sections to take you across there. So this is the first part of the route. This is the road that comes out at Pocklington. It's called Killick Hill coming up here. So it's really coming up the side of the Wolds escarpment, the one that faces westwards here, and goes on a bit further onto water. There's a church in water where there's a priory used to stand behind it, and it's got the sort of a display on the Wolds heritage in there, because that should be open most of the time. Those who came on the trip to Beverley, we went in there on the way back. So I'm coming along the escarpment edge here, and then I'm going to drop down to Killick Percy Hall down here, and then continue on Warrendale Farm, up Warrendale Wold, to come out just to finish here, which is a fantastic view right down onto Millington. So we're starting, this is the Killick Hill road that comes out of Pocklington, looking down there, the Vale of York down there. Really, this sort of looking at the sort of geology here, the difference between the two. The Vale of York is largely boulder clay left behind when after the Ice Age, when the glaciers retreated. Whereas what we have here is the chalk upland that comes to a plateau on the top, laid down, as I mentioned before, probably 300 million years ago, when this a warm sea covered this area. So that's how the chalk was formed. Man has been around here for a long time because they traded flint in the chalk right across Yorkshire. So when and beyond, so when we're up at Victoria Cave above Settle, is that they found flint here because this is the nearest source of flint in the north of England, because it's most northerly chalk outcrop in the whole of Britain, and that was traded across there. So we'll see up here there's lots of things going back to the Bronze Age and before that, up all on the Wolds here. So the footpath crosses across this road and takes us in to the sort of the, not quite the top of the escarpment edge, but bringing along the middle of the escarpment edge there. It's wonderful, like I say, that's wildflower meadow. There's sort of the scenery around here and the wildlife and things like that. It's sort of incredible. And really, it's a completely different type of scenery that we've seen elsewhere, really, this type of the Wolds. Looking down there, that's the top of Kilnwick Percy Hall. But before I go down there, we get this exhibition, this panel to the Pilgrimage of Grace. It's here because they've done a sort of Pilgrimage of Grace heritage trail that starts down in Pocklington at the church, comes up here by Kilnwick Percy Hall, then crosses over to Numburnham because there was a nunnery there, then climbs up to Water because there was a priory up there. So it's about an 8.5 mile trail up there, because they probably make it a bit of, you're going uphill all the time on that. Just to remind you about the Pilgrimage of Grace, it was really the Northern barons who were against Henry VIII's creation of a Church of England and outlawing the Roman Catholicism. And because most of these sort of great landowners in the north were staunch Roman Catholics. But the rising actually didn't start off in Yorkshire. It started off in Louth in sort of northern Lincolnshire, and then spread northwards across the Humber. And really, it was this area that became the hotbed of it, or really the rallying point for it. And so in October 1536, is that people converged on Pocklington to camp on the moor. And it's estimated there are about 10,000 people camping there. That's why the route starts off down there. And then some people on the way had Roman Catholic services held in Hull, held in Beverley, and held in York as well. So we're coming down from all these different places. But it was really meant to be a peaceful demonstration. So they set off, and because they collected other people en route, and there's meant to be around about 50,000 people by the time it got to Doncaster. There they met sort of 8,000 of the King's troops. I think they're a bit worried because obviously they were overwhelmed in numbers, and there was a bit of a parley between the leaders, and they said that they wanted to speak to the King about having Roman Catholic services in the north. He allowed them to come down to London, the leaders. He then arrested them and had them executed. And really that was the end of the Pilgrimage of Grace and the put down of the opposition to the Church of England in the north. But obviously it continued on because we've seen before over in York and the private chapels built in houses and things like that. So that's really what we have on this panel here. Is it's likely that people probably come across this area converging from Beverley and other places to go down to Pocklington. Pocklington's probably just over here, and like I say, the camping site where they met is probably just beyond Pocklington itself. So that's the sort of a history of that, and that's why that's there. So I guess there's numerous other trails of this, panels and things on the way up to Water as well, explaining a bit about it. But that seems to give a complete general overview of the whole Pilgrimage of Grace. And like I say, on that photograph there, it shows where some of the places are that you can see in that view. So beyond there is that the Wolds Way is a national trail, and 15 of them, and they're funded by the I just lost my place here, Natural England, and the first one of the national trails was the Pennine Way. And there are other ones in Yorkshire as well. We've got the Cleveland Way and obviously the Wolds Way as well. Really the symbol for the national trails is the acorn. And on here it says Filey 48 miles. This Wolds Way route I think is 89 miles. And I think you meant to do it over 6 or 7 days, although I did it over 9 days. The national trails are also responsible for this England coastal path as well. It does say on their website, but it will be finished in the year 2020, which means it is today. That hasn't happened, and I can't see it really happening for at least another 10 years because they've got to get landowners' permission, especially sort of farmers, to run this footpath along cliff edges. So we see that at the moment you can walk from Berwick on Tweed right down to sort of coming on to Spurn Point, but then there's no path from Spurn Point. Obviously you can't go across the Humber Estuary, but then it's meant to go through Hull to the Humber Bridge, over the Humber Bridge, but it's really the path from the end of Spurn coming along Sunk Island, if you know that area, Paul, and other places. So I think they're sort of negotiating rights of way. We'll then go over the Humber Bridge. Part of that is open because I showed you it when we looked at the southern end of a bridge, and then I think it can go far as not Mablethorpe, but again, you can only go far as Grimsby or Cleethorpe, because then it comes into tidal reserves, salt marshes, and other things. So I have no idea how we're going to get from Cleethorpes to Mablethorpe, but there must be a way. But that's sort of part in progress. So that's the only bit I've really looked at. So you can really walk roughly half the England footpath from there. So there are enough of these markers around it. It's incredibly well waymarked, signposted, that you actually don't need a map. You don't need a book. I only got lost once, and that was actually going through a farm where he painted the arrow on the building, and then it ended up in a yard with 4 possible exits. And so that's the only time I've sort of wandered around trying to wonder where it actually did go to. After that, it ended up with a field full of cows, actually, who then chased me right across the thing, and I actually had to near enough jump over a 5-bar gate at the end. That was probably in the season, that was probably in sort of July that was. So that's the Wolds Way, and really sort of the path that you see here coming up along this section of it. The view down there to Kilnwick Percy, a hall down there in the trees. So this is the hall. It's sort of there's probably been a manor house here since sort of medieval times. The last time a house was mentioned here before what we see today was built around 1574. It was then largely some part of that is inside of it because there's sort of a wooden structure inside of that. But really what we see today was largely rebuilt in 1720. Although it says Kilnwick Percy, there's no village of Kilnwick Percy, but there used to be in medieval times. In 1350, there were 60 houses here, giving a population probably of around about 200. But really that came to an end, I guess, 1574 to 1720, when the lord of a manor forcibly moved those villages out, and they dispersed elsewhere. And so the house was sold it was built for Sir Edmund Anderson, and the architect, funny enough, picking up from earlier in the week, was William Etty, the chap from York who did the Fountains Hospital that we saw on Monday. So it's oddly, it didn't come up on the search for him, but he'd actually done Kilnwick Percy Hall as well. So that's largely the house there that we see. But the portico on the front was added on in 1790. So it was built, the core of the house, for Sir Edmund Anderson, then sold in 1784 to a Robert Dennison, who was a Leeds woolen merchant, and he employed then John Carr to come in and add bits on and reconfigure the inside of it. And they say the estate was large at the same time, to 2,300 acres. It was then sold in 1840 to Sir Admiral Arthur Duncombe. He was the son of Lord Faversham of Helmsley, of Duncombe Park. And it was him who added the portico on the front in that year. Sold in 1920 to the Whitworth family, and then requisitioned by the military in World War II, who actually destroyed most of the interior of it. People were very upset when they came back into it, largely because there were 32 bedrooms in here, and they knocked them together into 12 large rooms upstairs. So whether they're planning or whether more dormitory style accommodation, I don't know. And then it was bought by Lord Hotham after that, and he sold off really the lands and its assets in 1954. The hall then became a farm, and just accompanying with it were just 340 acres. So, and then in 1986, it was sold and bought by the Buddhist Mandan Maka Candampar meditation centre for sort of day and sort of week-long retreats with courses and classes in here. It's not the only centre that they have in Yorkshire, but this is by far the largest of them. But they have outliers at Driffield, Gould, York, Scarborough, Beverley and Pickering. The grounds here are open to visitors, so you can drive down here. So if you're coming out of Pocklington on the road that goes up Kilnwick Hill towards Water and Driffield, take the, really after Pocklington, you take the first left turn. It's signposted Kilnwick Golf Club, I think it is, or is it Pocklington Golf Club? But it's signposted to the golf club. You turn left and immediately turn right. It's very easy to miss, but there's a long drive down. It says about the meditation centre at the top. The drive might well be a mile. It passes the lake, but it's quite hard to see on when you're down there. On the right-hand side, and then there's quite a sort of, if anyone's been down there, a very sort of ornate entrance to it, saying it is a Buddhist centre with a Buddha cross-legged on the front. It's about sort of 10 feet high as well. It's not easy, you can't miss it. The path there goes right of that monument sculpture, and that brings you down to the car park in front of the hall. Like I say, it's open for people to have a wander around the grounds, and they also have a vegan, I think it's called the World Vegan cafe down there as well, which is in the grounds behind it. But if there's no courses going on, so when I went down there, and had actually sort of emailed them before, and they said if I was down there and there were no courses on, somebody would show me around. The only thing you'd have to do is sort of take your shoes off and put some sort of paper shoes on or bags over your feet as you go round here. It's quite surprising when you see sort of the opulence of the ceilings, and then the quite garish sort of Buddhist type paintings they have adorning the walls around there. But like I say, it's good to visit down there, but it does look private to begin with. But if you look on their website, and they do sort of flyers as well that saying anybody's welcome to come down here and you can wander around there, but because access to the hall, the interiors itself, is only limited when there are no classes on. And I guess I was probably there about lunchtime and there was nobody in, and a chap showed me around. But you can wander around the gardens because there's a lake down there, but there's also a church here as well. And you say this is now a redundant church, and it doesn't belong to the Buddhists, so they got nothing to do with it, although it's only about a minute walk from the terrace itself, and so you can't go into it. A church was here for the village built here 1232, but unfortunately in Victorian times in 1864 it was completely demolished. That's what we really see here today, and it's sort of been built in a sort of Norman style as well. Like I say, you can't go into it, but it a bit about it said it was interior was elegant. The pews and stalls are of oak, richly carved, and the windows are filled with handsome stained glass. So there's just one monument from the earlier church of a chap called Thomas Wood, who died in 1570. So that's what you can see down there. Like I say, there's acres of lands around there, and it's well laid out with paths and things like that. So well worth a visit going down there. So going back up onto the pathway up here on the top, this is where sort of when turning the corner, roughly where that Pilgrimage Grace board was, coming down now to Low Warrendale Farm and then climbing up Warrendale. So we're sort of coming to the top of the Wolds round here. You can see it where it flattens out up there, and then that bit of path then takes us across to Millington. So there's lots of farming because agriculture is the main industry on the Wolds, and Low Warrendale Farm is one of those mixed agricultural places as well. And so this is sort of they tend to sort of grow sort of barley, wheat around here, quite mostly on the tops, and then they also graze cattle. But here it seems to be a mixed one because they actually have pigs here as well. Further on the route, I found huge pig farms around there, especially going towards Hummonby and areas like that. Huge sheds, but they sort of a smaller one here. called Warren Dale because it drops down to this sort of a dry dale, which actually got some trees on it, because most of the dales on the Wolds tend to be treeless. But I think back in the Middle Ages is that a lot of these wolds had scrub on them, and then they've been cleared really for sheep grazing, and obviously a lot of the wood's been chopped down for use domestically and other ways. So we're coming down the farms up there, and that's a sort of really the first sort of picture of the sort of the traditional Wolds Dale that we see. So it's only a very short one, quite high up. They're created, as I mentioned, along by meltwater from glaciers that drained across here. And then this is a really big climb up onto the plateau. Because this is quite a gentle climb, as we'll see later on. There's much steeper climbs up onto the plateau, and quite often you go up and down, up and down, up and down in succession along the Wolds as well. So that's really the view looking down. There's a couple down there. They sort of park their car just at that junction there, and they're walking across to Millington to have lunch there, but weren't looking forward to coming back because it's a gentle sort of rise up here. But the Millington back up here, it's quite a very, very steep climb indeed to get back up. So that's who we see there, and there they are, crossing across really the top of the Wolds, going across to Millington. That's I think that's wheat in that field there. Huge field, as you can see on the previous photograph. Coming over to Millington, and really that's the view you get down onto the village itself. Again, on a clear day, it's not quite clear this day, but you should be able to see York Minster on that, over in that direction in the background. Again, this is sort of the escarpment edge, but this is sort of changed around here because we've got the Millington Dale coming down here and then draining into the across the Vale of York itself. So it's really sort of half and half on the Wolds. It's also interesting to see here, which I'll mention a bit later on, these huge fields which are behind, because they date back to medieval time and would have been open fields in use by the people from Millington to graze their cattle on. But I said there's a whole story about that a little later on, but now they were enclosed, and that starts off about 1786, probably running into the early 1900s as well. So let's pop down and have a look at Millington. It's probably just draw a line to give you a rough idea of where it is, but it's sort of, we've got the main road, of what is termed a main road, coming across the top here. That's the road from Pocklington that eventually goes across and comes out at Huggate. This road here is a road that goes over to the A166, which I guess might just be over on the top here. And there's a turning off to Millington at the top of Garraby Hill. And I think it says Millington 2 miles or something like that. And so quite often is that you'll come into Millington through this road here. It's all a bit sort of confusing then, because straight forwards, if you're coming on that road, is the main road that comes around Millington itself. And so if you come down here along the main road and pop up the other side, you might not actually see the church, as I didn't the first time I came in 2016. The church is there because there's another road coming down it. So it's really two sort of rectangular blocks put together with Church Lane or Church Street in the middle, connecting between the top road and the bottom road. So that's sort of the layout of Millington, as you can see on this map here. The church there being represented by this cross, like I say, on that middle road, top of that middle road coming down. It's quite well screened from the top road as well by trees. The bit of film I'll be showing you will be coming down this road here, coming along the bottom of here, and coming up the other side to go out towards Huggate along that way as well. So on my bit of film, you don't actually see the church either, because otherwise you'd only see part of the village. If I'd just do that square down there. It's quite a small village. It has a population of around about 250 people. In 1823, it had a population of 282, which is probably around about its peak population. Then, like the whole of Britain, it was sort of the agricultural economy was but improved with machinery coming along in late Victorian times, which saw an exodus of people, or the lack of jobs for people in the farming industry. So in 1891, there were 193 people living in Millington. So it really hasn't changed that population really between around about sort of 200, 250 types of things, but and it's still quite a large agricultural area today, as we'll see as we go round. So let's go in and look at a few of the photographs to begin with. So coming in on that first road, it's we're coming down to what was the Wesleyan Methodist Church. There was a primitive Methodist chapel here as well, further down around the corner, that's now been converted into a house. This is now, as it says there, is the village hall, and that's now been, because now it's a village hall, but it's also more than a village hall, because you can actually rent their camp beds, as they say, for the night. And they also, as it says on their poster, can provide ingredients for a Yorkshire cook your own breakfast. So there you go, because there is other accommodation in Millington. I'll add my proviso there. There was also a village school that set off in 1804. The school was then erected in 1837 and closed in the 1930s, because there's none of that around anymore. Maybe the 1950s, I couldn't find an exact date for it, but that's now being demolished. I'm coming down here, and then really you've got to turn left onto the main street. Then I'm coming back up the next street, the parallel one, to see the Church of St Margaret at the top. This is of a Norman foundation, because it stands at the top of Church Lane. The main road behind that goes from Pocklington across the Huggate is straight behind there. There's a car park there as well. You can see a number of cars parked in there. So it's only a couple of minutes walk down to here as well. And then largely, really what we see again is 14th century outside, when they added the windows in here, and probably the chancel onto there. Like I say, I've been here twice, and it says it's open, but it's never been open. But there are a couple of things in front of it you can see here. There's a base here, and that's like a to hold a cross in there. It's like a socket. This stood further down this road here, and there's a little junction where one road goes to Pocklington and the other goes to Great Givendale, again, which near enough comes out onto the A166. And that was probably either a way marker, or they think that the burial site for the parish was here at St Margaret, and there wasn't one initially at Great Givendale. And they think that they might have rested people on top of that cross base. So I have no idea whether it was a cross or a cross base, but that's where that socket came from further down the road. This one over here, this stump there, that at one time held a, what's its name now, a sundial on top of there, but that's long gone as well. So I've not been in it. The small brick-built sort of tower there, that was added on in 1824 when part of the church was restored. And so that's probably why it's been propped up here at the side as well. One thing I didn't see, but there's I think around in this area somewhere, is that there's a squint hole there. That's for lepers to look in on onto the altar up there at the top. So I only read about that afterwards of visiting there. So that's the Church of St Margaret. It's still open. The doorway there, that's the original doorway into it. So further back down, coming down that centre road, really the church is behind here. This is the gate in a building that dates back to the 1600s. So it's probably has always been a pub. This building it takes in here was a former blacksmith's property workshop here. Like I say, it was really an agricultural economy around here with blacksmiths and other things like that, so supplying into it. So it's not spelt incorrectly, although we would spell it G-A-T-E, and it's rather similar to how the Stray operated in Harrogate, so it was those great fields were divided up into imaginary gates. A gate could hold a you could put to pasture 6 sheep, or 4 sheep plus 2 lambs, beasts under 2 years old, or 1 beast over 2 years old. And so that's really how those gates work. We'll see a bit of the pasture land again further on. So that's really the common land, and that's the amount of cattle that you could put on to feed on one of those. And so they were divided up into a number of gates up there. The pub here, and like I say, it's, if anybody's sort of come around the Wolds, is that you got some odd opening times as well. I wouldn't come here on a Monday because it's definitely closed, and obviously probably closed at the moment anyway. But normally it's open Friday to Sunday for lunch, and in the evenings they serve meals Tuesday to Sunday as well. So I would say it's probably best coming on a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday to guarantee being fed down there. But there is an alternative, because just across the road from that is we've got the Ramblers Rest tea rooms. So this is open Thursday to Monday from 10:30 in the morning to 4 o'clock. Because it's converted from some barns and outbuildings of a farm down there. It's been a tea room here since 1985. Not just a tea room, but they also do, they have a restaurant down here, but I don't know how often that operates in there as well. So I cycled here in the hope of getting a cup of tea, but obviously I probably came on a Tuesday or a Wednesday when it was closed, much to my chagrin, and with my son, who wanted me to order a taxi to take us back to Stamford Bridge at the start. That didn't happen, and we swapped bikes, and he rode off, and I got his old rickety bike. But that's the story of the sort of the opening times of some of these places round here. Look at this next section, because this is probably the loveliest section of the lot, really, because it's you can see where I've walked along here on the top of the Wolds. Sometimes it looks straight across, you can't see the bottom of the valley down there, but this is where the road comes along here. It's suddenly at this point here, as you see on the film a little later on, this is where it starts here, because you get a wonderful view down Millington Dale, and then it zigzags down into it and then runs along the bottom and eventually climbs up at the end where it meets the road from Water going towards Huggate as well. And like I say, this shows you where Millington Wood is on it, and here the site of a Roman road that came across here as well. So I'll pick up on some of those things as we go around along. And we got these two side valleys here. You can see by the contours on the map. This one here is Silverdale, as it's called, and this one here is called Nettledale, because they're about a 10-minute walk between the two. But there's car parking just here by a pond, and that's largely because some clay has come to the surface there. That's why there's a sort of a pond there, because the villages that we sort of have looked at are normally located at the bottom of the escarpment edge. So further over there's Bishop Wilton, obviously Pocklington, and Market Wheaton as well, largely because it's easier to get to water there. It comes naturally out because obviously water falling on chalk drains away straight away. That's why it's unusual to have this pond here as well, largely because they probably extend it with a bit of clay lining as well within that. But that's probably part of the reason for Millington being further down, because there's a source of water coming through the village. And as we'll see when we get up to Huggate, there's no water at all. They have to sink large deep wells to get to the aquifer bit below that, Huggate being the highest village on the Wolds. So let's have a look along here. So those are the sort of bits I'm going to look at in this, and then the path and the road climbs up there and turns a corner, but the dale still continues onto another higher section of that. But I could only get these smaller sections off the National Trails website to show where we're going to go. So let's have a look at the next section along here. And there are quite a few things to see along here. They've done like I think there's 11 pieces of what they term artwork along here. 6 of those have been benches. I've shown you some before, the sort of the larger wooden sculptures, which are like sort of the things that the Percy put in their burial tombs. That's on this trail as well. And I think I'll show another couple of things along here as well. But here there are 6 poetry benches along here, and they come from the workshop of Angus Ross in Aberfeldy in Perthshire, and they were installed in 2011. What you probably can't see is that normally written into here is a few lines of a poem as well, and they sort of meant to represent the area as it is. So this is really looking on the bottom of Millington Dale here, where you drive along. And then this, I guess this is the escarpment edge, and these might be the side valleys coming off here of Silverdale and Nettledale here as well. The footpath, like I say, takes us right across the top of it, but like I say, the footage I'll show you later on is from the car down in the valley bottom. They're both excellent bits to either walk along or drive along. And so this is looking across to Millington Woods, because there was a signpost for that at the end of a bit of film, largely because there isn't great extensive amounts of woodland on the Wolds. They say a lot of that would have been chopped down for wood and for domestic fuel and things like that. But they estimate that this woodland has been untouched really since the Norman times within there. And because this is all ash wood in there. If you're down in the bottom, there's a little bit of a car park, and there's paths that go through it. Some of those paths are quite steep and can be quite muddy as well, because obviously there is soil on that to drain down into it. I was quite surprised is that, not quite here, but when they've ploughed some of these fields, is actually how much stone there is in it. But again, sort of improvements over the centuries has led to the growing of sort of barley and wheat and other sort of cereal grains like that around here. And like I say, it's quite steep as well, because the field line is about there, because it just suddenly plunges after that, because with that tractor on there. And then again, these fields over here, they're all part of Millington pastures that we see all on the tops there. So this is really sort of quite a large plateau that goes across. So these pasture rights were awarded to 108 people for grazing. So these are open fields, and then were enclosed from 1768 onwards. I think the last enclosure one of these was in the 1990s, and there's a great furore about it, but I couldn't find the article that I'd read that in, because they ought to have said that one should have been kept as an open field like that as well. as well. So we can see that what they're growing up here now, that's, I'd say, fairly recent, because lots of these places here, they had them as rabbit warrens around here. I guess that's why the previous one was called Warrendale, because it was a big industry in the sort of the 18th century and into the 19th century. They were wanting rabbits for their meat and for the fur as well. Because amazingly, none of these warrens exist anymore, because you thought it'd be quite hard work eradicating rabbits, because once they're there, they're impossible to get rid of. But I never saw any rabbits around here, but I did see hares, those, you could say, rather large, elusive creatures that loop around, and could say up in this area and further over on the more quieter areas going towards Humbenby as well. What we can see down here, actually, the road is actually all just a little bit. You can just see just down there, sneaking down there as well. This valley coming across here, where there's no access to it, that's called Deepdale on the other side of the road. Where this is curving down is it's coming down into the Sildendale. But really, that's a photograph from the footpath looking back down the dale down here. And to say these were created over really an 8,000 year period, when the sort of ice cap over the top of the Wolds started to melt, really 18,000 years ago, and completed around about 10,000 years ago. And really, it was a sheer volume of the meltwater coming off that carved down through the layers of chalk to create these. It must have been fantastic, because this has been really a sort of river of very fast flowing water to come down here, creating this very smooth sort of flat bottom U shape that we've got here, which are quite unlike any other sort of scenery that we have in Yorkshire. And to say, along the edge of this road, I know where they are, but they're just down here, and on the bit of film you'll see that there's some wooden posts along there, and say there's 11 of them, and each of them has got a letter on it. I never understood it when I photographed a couple of them, but if you add all 11 together, it says Gate in the Wolds, and they go up in sequence of height. The higher you go up, I think the taller the post is. So that's sort of another artwork that you can see down there in the bottom of the valley. And you say on the next one, we're coming across to Sildendale. That's what we're looking down onto. That's where you can park by that pond and walk up to Sildendale. Because it comes out, and because it's a lovely track. But this is where the Roman road came across. It didn't come down the bottom of there. It came across the top here and round here, where I'm actually stood taking this photograph, then dropped down into that dale, and then climbs up the other side. This was coming, the road crosses the other road in between the letters I and N on the posts. That's where it says Gate in Wolds. So it's on the letter where it spells out in between those two posts. So this is the road that goes across the top of Garraby Hill, continues on a straight line, and you can drop down the road to Thixondale from there, and eventually goes to Malton, where the Romans had a fort down there. From the other side, it's a continuation from Brough, where the legions came across from Lincoln, crossed at South Ferriby to Brough, and then this is the road went from Brough. It went up to Market Wheaton, and at Market Wheaton, the Roman road split. It went across to York, and then this climbs across through Lonsborough Estate to Water, and then crosses from Water, which I guess is over in that distance, and then comes around here. So there's really not much to see or anything of it. But in 1745, somewhere in this area, and it's not marked on any of the maps, is that a circular Roman temple dedicated to Diana was found up here as well. It was laid with mosaics, and they found other Roman things as well. I think it was about sort of 45 foot across in a circular thing, but like I say, there's no evidence of that anymore, or where any of those materials went to. And there's also around here, which are sort of been worked out now, but there are immense sort of earthworks as well. You can see that sometimes marked on those maps there, and they're thought to have been built around the Bronze Age. They're not quite sure where, for what reason, whether it's for defensive or for other reasons, but they date around about 4,000 years old. So that's Silverdale, but you drop down on the footpath, and as you can see how steep these are, so it drops straight down there. The old Wolds Way goes straight up the other side. I had my lunch down here, and I saw a lady went straight up that side, and she seemed to go fairly easily. Not so in the sort of hot weather and myself trying to climb up there. And I must say, I sort of laid out on the top. I went up in one go, which is a complete mistake. But the path now deviates across here and then zigzags its way and comes out at the top. And if I went back again, I would take the zigzag path because, as you can see from here with my friend, is that how steep that path is on the climb up there. I think she stopped about 6 or 7 times before achieving the summit. It's something that you don't really want to do, but the steepness of the sides of these side dales. You can see the path down there comes out, you can see, towards that pond down the side of that road, and it's only literally a couple of minutes walk. It's flat as well, straight into there, and there's a path that goes up the middle of that dale. Coming across the top again, and dropping down, this is Nettledale. They doesn't have any nettles on it, so I don't know why it's named, whether it once did have or not, I don't know. But you can see here the road coming up Millington Dale, and you can park in this area here. On the film, I think there's 3 or 4 cars, and then after that, the road starts to climb. I've cut that bit out because it's got hedges on either side, and there's really nothing you can see. But you can see the farm track that leads up there as well, and the sort of steepness of that. Again, the view from the top of sort of Nettledale, that's the road as it sneaks and then goes up around the corner and then comes up onto an area called Huggate Sheepwalk, which we'll see in a second. You say Nettledale, no nettles, but there are cows grazing on it there, right up on the sides at the top there. So they're fantastic because you can't see the whole of these dales because there's snake around, and some of them are quite long, especially the one we'll look after Huggate that goes towards Fridaythorpe, because you really walk the length of one of these, and they're quite fascinating, really sort of geologically to have a look at. So we're going to continue on this before I just show you the piece of film, because I'm going to come, this is where the road comes out, because it climbs to that point and then opens up again into what's called Huggate Sheepwalk, which is this area around here as well. And then the path, the roads all meet together. This is a road that comes from the middle of water out here. It's quite a minor road. And then, coming forwards here, it goes towards Huggate. This yellow road there, that's the link road from the A166, the main road to Huggate. So it's signposted off there before you actually get to Fridaythorpe. Again, it's about a couple of miles from then to Huggate, but there's good views from here. You can see where the path goes across the Great West Field across here as well. And we'll see there's a north field and there's obviously a south and east field around Huggate as well. And again, over here, you can see, these earthworks, which are all over the area. Look, there's another one over there as well. So there's quite a lot of these, but they really can't be seen anymore. Some of them were estimated to be sort of, 15 feet high, but like I say, over the century, probably weathering and other things like that. And then more latterly, the sort of, when tractors came along, ploughed a lot of these things up. So let's have a look at this last bit before we show the film. Coming to the sort of sheep walk, because that's the really the as we'll see later on in another talk, is that why a lot of villages were deserted, because agriculture didn't make any money for the landowner in the Middle Ages, largely because the demand for wool, because that's why the abbeys had huge granges that we've seen over in Malham and Grassington and elsewhere, is that it was the value of the wool, and that's why they sort of moved people off the land and cleared, the scrub and whatever else it was up here on the wolds for sheep and that sort of really sort of continues today on this sort of mixed agricultural culture that you get around here. Lots of sheep, lots of cattle as well. So this is the sheep walk. The path comes around here and joins the road by these trees up here at the end. The road is in the bottom down there. You can't quite see it. Snakes around there, then climbs up to meet the path and that junction of roads coming from Water and from Huggate there at the top. And again, this other view where this sort of farming takes place on top of a hill round here. Look how tiny that tractor is up there and how vast that field is as well. So that's the sort of agriculture of the area. And again, finally, just that last view up there to the top of the sheep walk. So hopefully, yes, there's some film of this. So this sets off, at the top of the dale and climbs all the way up to meet this thing. So I think it's about 4 minutes, but it'll probably take you about a 10-minute drive or something. It's very narrow. There's very few places to park, and you hope you don't meet anything coming the other way. And like I say, it's about a 2-mile route along here, but it's the scenery which is fantastic. And there's only very few places on the Wolds where you can actually drive along a dry valley bottom. Another one will be when I show you at Thixondale beyond that towards Birdsall, is that there's a huge long one you can drive along there. But otherwise, you're just passing over the top of them or seeing the ends of them. We've arrived at that point just there. This is the minor road that goes to Huggate. The the Huggate is sort of cut off. It comes to a dead end down here as well. And so if you come along the top of the road, you pass the Wolds Inn pub, and then that goes out towards Wetwang and to other places as well. This here, that's the link road that goes out to the A166, the main road, because it's about 2 miles away as well. We're coming to join this dale coming down here, which is Horse Dale, which you can actually see the top of as you come along this road here. And there's good views towards Huggate as well. This here is still a working quarry, so they're quarrying chalk down there. But the footpath comes across the Great Westfield and then drops down. And actually doesn't actually go into Huggate itself. It comes out below the church, and then this is just an access road, but it follows to Northfield Farm or house. And then before that, it takes this left-hand turn to come across to Horse Dale. So let's have a look along here. Again, we're following the route across the Great Westfield across here, and coming to the plateau, it crosses that road then that goes out to the A166. And really from that road, that's the view you get of Huggate. This is the main part of the village. The church is right at the very bottom end of that. It's the highest village in the Wolds. It stands 558 feet above sea level, or if you want to, in modern parlance, 170 meters, and has a population of around about 350. So it is a slightly larger village than Millington, but it has less facilities than Millington. Because it's really, I think it's marked off the A166, is that the Wolds Inn is located on this road. So that's really where we're going to come around to. And one of the other things that is notable in this area are these field posts that a chap has put here, a farmer called Newark Andrews, and he casts these concrete posts, rather like an upside down bell jar, I guess, or something like that, in the 1960s. And he's given some of these posts around here the field names that they're called from the map. He's actually had them translated into Latin as well, and he wasn't sure what a field was called. He made them up as well. Some say keep Britain tidy, and that's in Latin as well. So quite amusing on there. So that's the Roman field, and they're over a wide variety of fields by the side of a road. And this has got two. It's just at the on that road that goes out towards the A166, and that's the sort of field system got up here. How big they are, I guess growing. I'm not quite sure what they're growing there, but it was taken at the same season that they were cutting the corn and things like that. So I've no idea what that is. So that road that comes out the top of Millington Dale comes straight forward, and they say it comes across to the Wolds Inn. Note they've got some of these concrete style gate posts as well. That just says Wolds Inn. There's one on the other side as well. So this road in front then divides, goes to Wetwang, it goes to Tibthorpe, which is on the road between Beverley and Wetwang, and to North Dalton as well. And it's a 16th century building again. It's been enlarged with the inclusion. I think that was a garage which I saw on a previous photograph from the 1960s. And it's been in its current ownership since 1992. It does say on the board, established 1992. I don't think it's when the pub was established. I think the pub, judging from the old photographs, has been there a lot longer. And again, it's got some odd opening hours as well. It's one of these ones, I don't think you go onto the Wolds earlier in the week because this is open Thursday to Sunday for lunch and evening meals. That seems to be sort of general consensus. Just looking beyond that here, there are two buildings next to that. This one here is the former school that closed in 1960. And this was the Master's House. The one beyond here is the former Wesleyan Chapel that was built in 1885, and then closed in 1974. It's now been turned into a house. I was umming and ahhing over the dates there because further round the corner was the original Methodist chapel, built in 1837, and was then in use until 1885, and now has been converted into a house. There was also a primitive Methodist chapel in the village built in 1849, but that was demolished in the 1980s. The road is a bit of a crossroads here. That's the road to the right would be coming from this direction, from the Millington direction, and then turning down here. That's why you don't immediately come across the pub if you're going to turn down into the village there. I think I made a mistake. When I came up in the car, I should have turned left to come in front of the pub so you could see exactly where it was. The crossroads here, that's another minor road that goes over to water. But I'm coming down here into the village itself. You can take a circular, as you can see on the bit of film, drive round it. So the road divides by the village green, which is towards the top end of the village. It's noting here there's an old millstone here on the site of the well that they used to draw water from. It's the second deepest well in Britain and is 339 feet deep. So before they actually got to the aquifer down there. So it must have been a hell of a long time if you're going to haul a bucket up and down from there. I'm coming down to the right-hand side first. There's a bit of a pond there at the bottom, but there's a much larger one here. It looks a bit more like a mill pond, but it's meant to be, it's called Mar Pond, but it's a derivation from the word mere pond. So the road skirts around here, and then at the end of the road drops down right to the church. And this is the church of St. Mary, built in the 13th century, but the tower and the spire was added in the 14th century. That's the war memorial stood there. I guess it's normally open all the time. I went in at the end of the day, so I didn't have a flash with me, so I'm sorry about the sort of the photographs here being slightly darker. The nave and the sort of chancel arch there are 13th century, and then they built up in the 14th century, much larger. So these are Norman windows here that have been moved, which were probably further down and then moved higher up along there. And then they added these clerestory, I can't pronounce it, clerestory windows up here, and because they are slightly rounded arches here, not quite the perpendicular style here, but not as rounded as that. Those are, because they've got more pointed arches as well. I guess as I've mentioned before, over the years, the different building styles really, the Normans using the rounded arches to begin with, and then coming in sort of the 14th century where the perpendicular style, where everything was pointing up towards heaven. Probably why the spire was added in that century as well. And I say it was much restored in 1864, and all the Georgian furnishings were taken out as well. The stained glass there is Victorian as well. So it's really the chancel arch and the other bits. There's really not that much to see on the inside. And just inside the door, that's the Norman font as well. And then this is really the road there is really the end of the village, so that I've cut this film in the middle, so it comes down by the side of the church, and then I'm coming up again, so I had to turn round. The road that continues down is really a farm access road that goes out to Northfield House, and that's really where the Wolds Way continues on there. So this is a look round Huggate. Just a few slides left to show the last bit of this. We're going about another 2 miles from the bottom of Huggate, going out to Fridaythorpe. I'm not really showing Fridaythorpe, but this is a lovely walk between here. You come down Horse Dale, and then you walk up the entire length of Holm Dale. You can continue round here. There's another bit of a continuation of Horse Dale round there as well. And because it ends up in Fridaythorpe, it's about 2 miles. This is on the main A166, so it's that road there goes off to Sledmere straight ahead. It goes to Wolds, etc. So here we are coming out towards Northfield Farm, where he's planted an avenue of trees along here. This is where the footpath goes up. Just before it climbs up, it goes across Cowdale. It always amuses me. You come across these, a Nettledale with no nettles, a Cowdale with no cows but sheep on it. This is part of the, you might have seen it on the other maps as well, other sort of distance footpath across this area. This is the, if you can walk down here, this is part of the Chalklands Way. It's a 40-mile circular route taking in Great Givendale, that's just beyond Millington, Bishop Wilton, Thixondale and Wetwang. This is the path that goes out towards Wetwang. But now we're crossing across to Horsedale. No horses, of course. We've got cows in Horsedale. And this is absolutely sort of fantastic dale round here. And just along here, we come to the next poetry bench along here. Again, designed by artist Angus Ross. There's a quote along here from a poem I never forgot to have a look at him, called John Clark. And it's written across the tops of that there as well. I think they're lovely, these benches, because they're so unusual and sort of fitting with the landscape as well. And it's meant to show the bend here of Horsedale on top of it, and how it starts off and how it ends and things like that. So the path drops all the way down the side, so you can look back on Horsedale as well. That's you can see the main the access road to the A166 is at the top there, so you can actually look down that first part of it when you're driving between really Fridaythorpe and coming to Huggate itself. I'm going to say, just the twists and the bends in there, it doesn't look sort of natural. It looks sort of fairly artificial, but it must have been fantastic as they to have sat up here and probably watched the huge amounts of water coming down here, carving out, and the shapes are phenomenal. I'm going to say that the path comes down here. That's Horsedale crossing the top of Holm Dale, and right at the top of Holm Dale, you walk right up the bottom of here as well. And it comes out at the top into Fridaythorpe. That's a view. Sorry, I exposed it to the sky of coming up Holm Dale, but because it's a fantastic sort of panoramas you get here, and the trees on the top, and there's a few cows there as well, and eventually that path comes out at the top at Fridaythorpe. I'm just choosing this photograph here. The main road is just there because it comes behind these buildings and drop down there, so you don't actually normally see the pond at Fridaythorpe. But it's also the halfway almost point on the Wolds Way. It's you've come 39 miles from Hessle. I've showed you that a few months ago, coming down the Hessle foreshore underneath the Humber Bridge, and it's another 40 miles to Filey Brig. So to commemorate this, in 2012 they built what's called the bus shelter down there, and it's another sort of art installation along the Yorkshire Wolds Way, and it's where people can have can sit in there, rest and have a picnic, so they say. But that's when I come to look at another this other part of the Wolds Way, is I'll be setting off at Fridaythorpe and going to Thixondale and beyond, so I'll tell you a bit more about Fridaythorpe then. So that's sort of coming to the end, well, it has come to the end of today's talk.